Good morning. Another slightly grey day in London, but that's to be expected. It is January. So trying to bring another little sunshine ray into your lives. This is the second of my series of conversations about challenge, resilience, and personal development. This is where I'm going to be speaking to people that I admire for the skills and techniques they use in their field of expertise, and how we can relate these into our everyday personal and working lives to stretch and challenge ourselves and become more resilient. So today I'm going to be talking to Tracey Carter. I've known Tracey for a number of years and been impressed by her transition into her current role as a beekeeper. The thought of being surrounded by thousands of bees, I'm sure, sends shivers up most of our spines. So in honour of meeting Tracey today and talking to her, I'm wearing some bee-themed jewellery. So welcome, Tracey.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about how you got into beekeeping and why?
Yes, it's a question that I think beekeepers get asked frequently. And for me, it goes back to my childhood growing up in Australia, where we would get our honey from the beekeeper on the corner. And I would walk into his bee yard and see the smoker with the smoke drifting from it, and, you know, the white smock that beekeepers wear. And I just thought it was absolutely fascinating. And so when I had the opportunity to get my own bees in 2010, it was kind of like a dream come true, really. And I'm very fortunate to keep my bees on an organic lavender field, which is owned by Mayfield Lavender. It's a very popular visitor attraction. And it's just wonderful meeting people there and telling them about bees all day long.
Although I can echo that. I've been to Mayfield Lavender on a couple of occasions, and it's just like a sort of dream vision. I believe it's one of the most popular tourist attractions in Europe, or is it bigger than that?
It's definitely in the southeast. But, you know, I mean, we get thousands of people every week come to visit us, and some of those people join me on a bee safari, where I show them the bees. They actually get to see inside a beehive, and it's a wonderful experience to see those people really, you know, respond to the bees.
Oh, fantastic. We'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. It's something that I've been very interested in. So we're going to talk about some of the things we can learn about honeybees around resilience and many other things. So I think the first sort of area we probably have to cover, given the current situation, is about our friend COVID-19, about coping with change. I mean, how's that affected the bees, and how have you and they managed to adapt?
Well, it's really, really interesting because bees and other pollinators have actually benefited from the lower levels of pollution during lockdown. So this is the first lockdown, and it's probably something that a lot of people will remember because it got a lot of news coverage. So what that means for a bee is that it's healthier and it's better to it's able to collect more nectar and more pollen, which means it can feed more babies, which means the colonies are bigger and are able to produce more honey, and just generally be healthy and more vigorous. So that's something that's that's research that's just come out of Royal Holloway, University of London. For me as the beekeeper, it was a completely surreal experience because honeybees are classed as livestock. Therefore, I had letters of permission from DEFRA to go out and look after my bees. So I would spend all day on a field in, you know, tranquility with my bees, and then come home and see the horrific news headlines. So it was kind of living this kind of split kind of existence, really. But no, the bees are doing well out of the reduced pollution.
Oh God, that's interesting, isn't it? I think we've heard about a lot about that, about how the planet's kind of reinvigorating itself, or definitely in the first lockdown, wasn't it? They were saying like plastic levels had dropped and things like that. So nice to see there's some positives out of it.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us on to resilience, and I think which is all being stretched to the max at the moment in the current situation. So what can we learn from bees in terms of strengthening our resilience?
Well, bees plan to survive. They collect nectar to make honey, to make sure they've got enough food for winter. They make more babies to ensure that they've got a good population, and they defend their hive. So everything they do is about going forward, um, and teaching each other the skills that are needed to ensure that it's about survival. Now, obviously, weak colonies often succumb to pests or diseases, and they die out, whereas the stronger and smarter colonies are the ones who survive, and their genes go into the gene pool. So it is survival of the fittest in many ways. But those colonies that survive have some amazing abilities, which we're trying to study and trying to replicate. So the best example I can give, I think, is about a parasitic mite. Okay, this is this is going to sound nitty gritty, but there is a parasitic mite which is, I would say, the biggest threat to honeybees globally, and it's called Varroa. And in fact, its scientific name is Varroa destructor. That's how serious it is. And it gets into the colony, and it breeds off the bees. It eats them. It eats the adults. It eats the brood, which are the baby bees. But guess what? Some bees are learning that if you can identify the babies that have Varroa on them, you can pull them out and chuck them out outside the hive and remove the mites from the hive. So those are called hygienic bees that remove pathogens or pests from the hive. And we don't know how they know that those mites are there, but we do know that they teach each other this behavior. And as colonies, they're stronger and more resilient, moving forward.
Wow. So when they, a little bit of a concern there, when you said when they get the babies out of the hive, what happens to them?
Not nice things.
Oh,
well, this is it. This is part of resilience for a honeybee, is to be slightly ruthless as well.
okay.
So they throw them out, or
Oh,
sometimes they eat them. But I wasn't going to mention that because it's even worse. But, but no,
right.
they will make those sacrifices in order to guarantee that that colony is resilient and will make it through the winter alive.
Wow. Sounds like what we maybe should have done about COVID-19. Let's not
Maybe.
go there. What it has sort of said, what a couple of things you touched on there is that whole area about team working. They always obviously have to work together as a team. And that's like almost like a model of community work in action. Can you tell us a bit more about how they work together?
Well, they work together in so many ways. I mean, their whole society is a very complex structure. And the ways that they communicate, the way that every bee has an allocated job, an allocated series of jobs that it progresses through its life, and the way that they tell each other what is needed in any given time. So, if there's a lot of nectar coming in, if it's the height of summer and there's a lot of nectar, but there aren't enough bees to receive that nectar and take it upstairs and start the honey process, bees will run around the colony headbutting other bees and shaking them. We call it shake and wake. Sleeping bees get shaken to wake up and get downstairs and offload that nectar that's coming in. So there are very complex behaviors going on in a beehive.
That's amazing. I didn't know about. I thought I knew quite a lot about bees from speaking to you in the past, but I didn't know about the shake and wake. And it makes me think there's a lot of people I've worked with that could do with that sort of methodology. Well, on that sort of theme, communication and how people communicate with each other. So communication is obviously something that's a bit of a challenge for all of us at the moment. Bees, I'm sure, don't use Zoom, but I'm fascinated by how bees do manage their communication from some things you told me in the past. If you can tell us a bit more about that and some insights you can share with us about how they communicate.
Sure, and it's interesting because bees have one of the most complicated ways of communicating in the animal kingdom, and probably the most famous way that they communicate is through what we call dancing. And the most famous dance is the waggle dance, in which a bee just shakes herself. She gets onto the face of the comb and she does a particular little dance, and all the other bees listen to her. They gather around in a circle, and what she's telling them is, I found something really good. You need to get there. Okay. So it could be a source of nectar or a source of pollen. And she gives them directions through this dance. She gives them the directions to the, let's say, flowers, directions to the flowers in relation to the angle of the sun at that moment. And she adjusts her dance by 1 degree every 4 minutes to reflect the fact that the sun is moving in the sky. It's quite amazing. And in fact, the man who decoded that waggle dance won a Nobel Prize for it. That's how important it is to understand.
Oh wow, really? So
Communication, yeah.
When was that? I'm fascinated that a dance has been decoded. When did that happen?
I think it was in the 1950s.
Wow. And I mean, I am kind of tempted to say, can you replicate that dance? Feel free.
It's, yeah, no.
No. No, that's fine. One thing that I think comes through a lot and some of the things you said about bees is that their tenacity. I'm kind of fascinated by tenacity. I think it's something that people have always sort of said, well, they've described me as being tenacious, and I think it's a really good skill to have, or a good, is it a skill or is it an inbuilt thing? I think it's something we can develop. What can we learn from bees about tenacity?
Well, I mean, I would say they're tenacious in everything they do because, as I said, they have this goal, this inbuilt planning that is about the survival of the colony. And, their focus is to rear babies, to make honey, to collect pollen to feed the babies, and to defend their hive, as I said before. So, that is the focus of what they do year in and year out. And with big colonies, you really see this, you really see the guard bees standing in the entrance, just waiting for a wasp or something to come in so they can attack it. So, yeah, I mean, it is inbuilt into them, and they won't give up.
No, that's really sort of quite powerful. And so, what threats do they face actually? What sort of, I guess you've spoken about the mites and things. And I'm just sort of thinking about the situation we're in at the moment, where we're having to be quite tenacious to get through this. Is there a sort of parallel with what a bee might face?
There are parallels, and I mean, I mentioned the mite. There are other pests and diseases which threaten them. The biggest threat, I would say, is climate change. It really affects them. For example, in this country, we used to have really cold winters, and that's good for bees. They actually do well in the cold. But now we're having these milder winters. It's not so good for them, and it means that things like that mite can keep breeding. Loss of habitat, wildflowers disappearing, etc. But the key thing that everyone is very worried about now is this use of neonicotinoid pesticides that is happening in this country again. They're banned in Europe, and obviously since we have left Europe, they've come back into use. And it's the way it works is that seeds are coated with a pesticide, and when that plant grows, the pesticide is everywhere in it, in its leaves, in its flower, etc. And of course, bees collect the nectar and get a dose of the poison, and they die. so it depletes colonies. So it's a very, very big concern for us. And as I said, I'm just so grateful my bees are on an organic field. They're very lucky. I hope they know that.
Oh, God. Well, that's quite well. That's something that I think a lot of people wouldn't be aware of, and
Mm.
one of the many downsides of. Anyway, let's not go into that political can of worms about
No, I
Brexit.
was very restrained then, I thought.
Very good. I suppose that sort of leads us on to the question about challenged. Obviously, they're challenged all the time on a sort of slightly different angle with it. I mean, I think what you're doing is quite challenging, as I said at the top of this sort of conversation, working with so many bees and having done one of those safaris myself. It was, you have to remember you're in that suit and you're protected, but thousands and thousands. If you can tell us about how many thousands of bees are in each hive, and talk a little bit about the bee safaris, because those are things I say. I went on one myself and took a group of people on for one of the Noodle events, and I think it's fascinating to watch people and their reaction. First of all, sort of they're going to do that, and then how they come through it. So what's been your experience working on the bee? If you can explain a little bit about the bee safaris and how you've seen people react to them.
Okay, so at Mayfield Lavender, I do these tours of the beehives, and they're called bee safaris. Sounds quite exciting, and it is exciting actually. So I spend 3 hours with people, like kind of teaching them about honeybees, introducing honeybees, and we do a honey tasting. So we can taste all the different types of honey, and people are always absolutely fascinated about honey, how honey from different plants tastes different. And then we put on the full bee suits and we go and meet the bees. And, most people are so excited about this experience. And occasionally I get people who maybe are there because their partner or brother or sister, whoever, wanted to do it, but maybe they're not so keen. But those people are often the people who end up holding the frames and, trying to find the queen. They kind of tend to get into it. But speaking of your noodle experience, the people on that obviously weren't self-selecting in terms of their interest in bees. It was a surprise, wasn't it, that they were
It,
doing it?
it was,
Um,
yeah.
and I remember one particular person who was, I wouldn't say terrified, but she was very nervous. So I put her in a double bee suit, and she managed to stand there and be fascinated and ask questions. So it's a real, I think of it as a real honor to be able to, introduce people to bees and educate them a little about, how incredible they are as creatures and what we need to do to protect them.
I talk about that experience all the time, and that thing when you say about holding the frame, when you're lifting the frame out of the bees, and you think, oh goodness, I mean, how many bees are there in a hive, and B, if you lift out one of those frames, what are we talking about?
Well, in summer, you could be looking at anything from 60 to 80,000 bees in a colony. And they're literally packed, to the top of the boxes. But that kind of doesn't matter because all of my bees are very docile. I don't keep bees that are mean because it's no fun for anybody. So yeah, they're all very docile. And the first thing that people say when I take the lid off and reveal the bees is, "Oh, we thought they'd be flying around and landing on us." And of course they don't. They stay in the hive. They're busy. It's, the summer nectar flow. They don't care about anything apart from getting that nectar in. So yeah, I'm really lucky to be able to do it. I've been doing it for about 5 years now.
Wow,
Um, and it
that's
was kind of
amazing.
my project, so I'm delighted that it's worked so well.
Yeah, it's great. As you say, I think anything like that that can bring those things to the public and sort of demystify some of that, where people get frightened, or we're used to seeing these films where there's plagues of bees and swarms of bees, and you think it's not.
Africanized bees, yeah.
So I think at this stage, I'm going to actually just show a couple of photos of some of those experiences you've done, so just people can get a taste of what that looks like close up. So I think I love the passion that comes across when you talk about beekeeping, and I think it's important to sort of relay that and say how that sort of affects your mental health. Actually, I think that's from what I can hear you saying, it's got some great positive effects on mental health and well-being. Can you talk about some of those?
Yes, it does. It does have a great positive effect. And when you're standing and you've got a hive of bees open in front of you, it's impossible to think about anything else. You're into the hive, you're reading what's going on. You really have to focus. And to me, that's almost like a kind of mindfulness, because you have to be present. You can't be worrying about the fact that your car needs an MOT and it's you need to book the appointment. No, you really have to be present, and that is actually when it's most enjoyable and when it's most wonderful to be with bees, because if you're quiet, they're quiet. Get to see them going about their business, and best of all, you get to hear them. So the sound of a beehive, that beautiful gentle buzzing, is just the most relaxing sound in the world to me, because it means they're happy.
Oh wow, that again, that gives us a different perspective on it for people who, I know a lot of people that have got this fear of bees, and it's the buzz that freaks them out. If they hear it, they immediately
Yeah.
go on the defensive. So that's really a nice way to kind of reprogram yourself about that. Makes me think as well about did we discuss the difference between the honeybee and the bumblebee?
No, we didn't. And I have to say, I'm no expert on bumblebees. Um, I'm no expert. I'm just a beekeeper. But I can tell you that bumblebees live in much smaller colonies. So maybe a few hundred bees rather than 60,000. And they build little nests under the ground. So they're ground nesting. And what happens in autumn is that the whole colony dies down, and the queen will hibernate and come out again in spring. So on kind of slightly warmer days, if you've ever seen those huge bumblebees
Mhm.
suddenly there and flying around, those are bumblebee queens, and she'll start a new nest. Honeybees don't stop. They keep going all throughout the year. They don't die back, so that the colony is completely depleted. And they cluster, they overwinter in a cluster, and keep each other warm, but they don't hibernate.
Oh
So they've
wow.
got it stacked against them.
I didn't know that actually. So the honeybees are definitely the workers, aren't they?
Mm.
And the bumblebees are a bit lazier. I think rumor has it you also might sing to your bees. Is that for your benefit or is that for your benefit or theirs? And what kind of songs do you sing to them?
Well, I went through a phase where I had this theory that if I played music to them, they would react. So I kind of tried everything from, very soft music to AC/DC. That didn't seem to have much effect. So yeah, I do sing when I'm there because I'm happy. But yeah, no, I do sing when I'm happy. But what I do is I talk to them constantly. And on the bee safaris, people laugh at me because the first thing I say when I open them up is "Hello, girls."
Oh,
So I feel, it's just polite to do that when you're going into someone's house. Um, so yeah, I do. I would say I speak to them and sing to them.
oh, that's lovely. I've got a great vision of you up there and singing away to them. That's lovely. Well, it seems we can learn a lot from honeybees. And what do you think is the most fascinating thing we should go away with, so that we might have learned about their behaviour and what we could implement into our daily lives?
For me, it would be the way they communicate through their dances, through pheromones. So pheromones are just kind of chemical messages. For example, if you get stung by a bee, a pheromone is released that will encourage other bees to come and sting in the same place. So that's not so nice. I've had that before. Um, and the way they feed each other and groom each other, it's all passing information around the colony. So I think communication, it's such a challenge right now. for us humans. And it's just about, I guess, spending that extra time in working out ways that we can communicate with each other like this.
I think this has been really fascinating. And say, I thought I knew quite a lot about honeybees from my previous conversations with you, but I think I've learned a lot more now, and it's been really, really insightful. So thank you, Tracey. I like to leave these little conversations with people sort of giving me their thoughts on what song they'd like to sort of share with people today to go away and sing to themselves.
Well, there's only one really, and that is ABBA, Honey, Honey.
I love it. Very good. Thank you, Tracey.
You're very welcome.